You're listening to Second Cut. This is the independent podcast formerly of thefilmmagazine.com, where we talk about topics in film theory, criticism, history, etc. I'm Jacob, and I'm the one who's not grungy. I'm bitchin'.
I'm Sam. I'm the one who wants you to get off my plane.
I'm Kieran. I'm the one that is realizing that his whole plot got destroyed on Big Bang Theory. That's probably where half people know it from. To roughly quote Rap Battles of History, what is it? There's a Big Bang you can't hide in a fridge from. In his rap battle against Lara Croft, I believe. Can you tell I'm an ERB person? Like, this is how I go.
Yeah. I liked the part in Oppenheimer where they disproved that, but...
Or that you can survive a nuke in a fridge.
Yes.
Like, I think that... we'll probably discuss it briefly, the fourth one, but I think that was like a plan for one of the earlier films that got scrapped, and then they brought it back in, a bit like the beginning of Blade Runner 2049 was a scrapped opening to Blade Runner. And this is kind of what happens now with movies, that if you get long enough to do a franchise, scrapped ideas then come back into later, normally not for the best.
Are there any of those in Alien Romulus, since that came out recently?
Yeah, probably the idea to bring back somebody for a gratuitous cameo through AI and things, which is absolutely pointless. They can argue and get away with, but it doesn't make it right.
I mean, all credit to Harrison Ford. He is one of these actors who, the more you read about him, the more awesome he turns up. I mean, most recently he was speaking out in favor of the voice actor for the Indiana Jones video game. Kind of really praising that he got he nails on the character, and it's a really good performance, because apparently originally they did consider doing like a deep fake of his voice, and he was very against that. He basically said, "No, you're not doing that. Give an actor a job, please." Yeah. I don't want to do it, but just cast someone who sounds enough like me, and that'll be fine.
Yeah, and as somebody that kind of grafted for an awful long time, like he got his major breakout, as we all discussed, was American Graffiti, and he was 30 when he got into that. He was the oldest one on set. So as somebody that had to work an awfully long time to actually, I mean, by Hollywood standards, a lot of the stars are kind of running out of steam by 30, 35.
And after American Graffiti, he was doing like odd jobs for George Lucas, which got him in the room for Star Wars, not as someone they're actually considering, but just as a scene partner, so reading the other lines for people doing screen tests.
I will go into that story, because he didn't just happen to be on set.
I know. By the way, did we do the original Star Wars? I don't remember.
I think you guys did Attack of the Clones at some point.
Yeah. We did the bad ones when it was an audio only podcast, and then I did Empire for James Earl Jones tribute last year.
Yeah. So I mean, maybe I should have done that, but whatever. We'll save that for a different time. Also could have done like The Force Awakens. I don't know. Just know, if you are coming here for Star Wars talk, it's going to be tangential at best.
Yeah. And like that was kind of, I didn't want to do Star Wars because that was the obvious pick, and I also didn't want to do Blade Runner because I just wouldn't shut up about Blade Runner. And I'm sure at some point I will just go, sod off you guys. I'm going to have a podcast for 5 hours just me talking about Blade Runner.
But let's be honest, as much for Star Wars is, I would argue that Indiana Jones is the more iconic character.
It is, yes.
We can argue about that. But first, let's get to some supporter questions. The first one comes from Stefan, and he asks, what would you ask Harrison Ford to carve you out of wood? And I'm assuming that means like he carves something out of wood and not a statue of you.
Yeah. I mean, this obviously references the fact that Harrison Ford trained as a carpenter.
He didn't apparently train as one. He trained himself to be a carpenter. Doing some research earlier, essentially, he got a couple of like odd jobs here and there. His first one was in.
Was this when the acting wasn't really taking off? And
so around sort of 68, 69. So he'd been in a couple of bit parts as kind of walk-ons.
He'd been on TV, like Gunsmoke and stuff like that.
the odd bit, but obviously, if you're getting maybe 2 of those a year, it's not massively paying the bills. So you need to do other things. So he trained himself to be a carpenter, and essentially kind of managed to half bluff his way doing jobs for people, so that he was kind of one of the reliable carpenters in town, so that he would manage to get working on film sets like that, and therefore he'd got the multiple things, which we'll come to eventually with Star Wars. Carving me out of wood. I don't know. I'd have to make it something that he'd actually enjoy doing. So maybe I'd ask him to do me like a little wooden plane or something like that, a little model.
I mean, I think if it's more practical carpentry, it'd be just a chair or something. Just something actually useful and practical.
Give me a door.
Yeah.
I would want a wooden whip.
I think something like that, and then I'll go, nah, it's too on the nose, like that's kind of cringe in a way. Like, no, I can't do that. So
Hey, it wasn't. What would you ask him that's not cringe? It's what would you ask him to carve?
It's like, what could you get that you could sell on eBay later?
Make it functional too. I don't want it to be solid. I want you to carve it in a way that I can like do that out of wood.
I don't think those exist.
Very. You have to be a very creative wood carver, I imagine.
I think, Jacob, I think what you're looking for is a stick. Like a bendy branch off like a willow or something along those lines. That's what you're after.
There
and
you
just
go.
put like a notch of HF on it and go, there we go.
I don't want his initial. I don't want a signature. I want it to be mine. I'll know. That's good enough.
Yeah, but then later on, it's like if you're really in a pinch, you can sell it off. Like I'm not saying I would, but like I've got to.
This is why Kieran collects film memorabilia.
Moving kind of gig stuff, maybe moving memorabilia is not so much, but I do get some stuff signed when I can. So yeah.
Yes. The next question is also from Stefan. He has thank you, Stefan. He has portrayed the president several times. During which election years would he have been elected in a real race? First of all, I want to ask you guys: do you have to be a British citizen to run for like prime minister?
No.
I think you've got to have a British passport, probably.
And not run for prime minister. Aren't they picked out of like the house of whatever?
Complicated.
Yes. So your vote for your MP who represents a party, and the largest party gets the prime minister, basically.
Yeah, so somebody will lead the party. So whoever, perhaps over there, leads Democrats or Republicans, and you vote for your MP, and then whoever has the most MPs or congressmen, I guess it would be over there. It's just whoever gets that.
And traditionally, you're either an MP or a lord to become, prime minister.
So Stanley Kubrick could have run to be an MP, is what I'm hearing.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. Very cool.
Comedian Al Murray, as a joke, ran a number of years ago. And every year you do get kind of the joke candidates. The most famous one being Lord Buckethead, who is a candidate for the Monster Raving Loony Party. Beautiful.
Over here we call that the Republicans.
Boom. Yeah, there is no difference. I have no idea what year he'd get elected president. Jacob knows more about US politics than we do.
I do have a thing about this. Which is this is quite a frequent thing, like about to have you got lots of articles and like listicles published about this, but basically taking like all of like the popular fictional American presidents, Harrison Ford's James Marshall from Air Force One often comes out on top with Bill Pullman as President Whitmore for Independence Day. Second, yeah. So
maybe it's just something about the 90s that they actually wanted a good president somehow.
Yeah, I mean the other big one from the 90s was Morgan Freeman in Deep Impact, wasn't he? So they're like the big three, I'd say, from 90s movies.
I have seen that apparently, though, you've got to be a little bit wary because apparently Air Force One is Trump's favorite Harrison Ford movie. Which I don't know what that says, but
he amazing. Harrison Ford being Austin again. He came back after he said that and said, So Trump said that because it was his favorite Harrison Ford role because he stood up for America, and Ford replied with, "It was just a movie," and made and then he made a hugely critical statement against Trump's first presidential bid on the back of that. Just
what years? What are the most recent Democrat winners?
Well,
you had Obama. Who's before that Democrat, Jacob?
Bill Clinton.
It was Clinton in the 90s.
Probably around then.
I think, one, Harrison Ford has that earring, and I'm not sure he could have, united the people who hate men with jewelry. He probably would have been off-putting. People know he's like a lifelong Democrat and environmental activist. And my answer is...
I was going to say, notably, he doesn't wear the earring in either of the roles where he plays presidents.
I think, actors weren't really winning the presidency until 2016. I'm guessing...
You're getting made governor of California, but...
Yeah, Arnold's not allowed to run since he's almost said Austrian.
But Clint Eastwood was he had some kind of a role, didn't he?
I think he's just like a prominent conservative supporter. I don't know if he's run for anything, but I'd go with since Joe Biden won in 2020, maybe Harrison Ford could have won in 2024 because he finally would have been old enough at the ripe old age of 81, 82.
Yeah.
And I think that he's a man and not a black woman. And so...
Or any woman.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously, if it was Harrison Ford running, on the platform, as you say, as like, quite a radical campaigner and everything, it's one thing. But I think both all his presidents, they've been quite traditional and conservative. So... So if it's Harrison Ford character we're thinking about, then he would have been a Republican, wouldn't he?
I think Harrison Ford too is kind of like a kind of common sense old school guy because I read that he donated to John McCain as well, who was Obama's opponent in 2008. So, he just kind of strikes me as the centrist that leans Democrat until things really started getting insane, in which case he came out against Trump. So
apparently, because his father was from a kind of Irish Catholic background, and his mother was from essentially a Jewish Russian background.
That's where you were going to say Irish Protestant.
I mean, Jewish and Irish Catholic is not that far off. Although actually they'd probably hate the Protestants more. But apparently, when asked if he was kind of Catholic, sort of Christian or Jewish, he goes, "I'm Democrat." Because like both sides are very kind of left leaning, which is surprising for a Catholic background. But
yeah, it depends on where you're from. Essentially, for that in the U.S., like if you're a Hispanic Catholic, you're a lot more likely to be conservative. I don't know, it's very weird. The Catholic Church certainly is not progressive in any sense, but.
I mean, it's progressive by 2025 America standards, but that's
not a high bar. And then the final question.
We'll stop depressing our host.
Where would be the best place for him to crash his plane? His next crash his plane, and that's Liam. Thank you, Liam, for that joyful question.
He's brought it down quite a few times, hasn't he, over the years?
Do you mean Liam or Harrison Ford?
I mean, if Liam's stood on a rooftop with a rocket launcher, then maybe it's his fault. Maybe he's asking us for ideas.
He has an entire section of his Wikipedia article entitled "Incidents" for his aviation.
So where should he crash his plane next? Into the Oval Office?
This is how it's meant to be done. Yeah.
I'm not allowed to say that.
No comment. I was going to say you would get done for inciting terrorism. We get done for sarcasm over here.
I think. I think maybe Harrison Ford could have been the pilot in The Dark Knight Returns, and Bane goes crashing this plane with no survivors, but Harrison Ford makes it because he always does.
Yeah, I suppose you could tie it into actually shooting a movie. You could get him to, be the guy behind the plane crashing scene in some
Ooh.
blockbuster.
If you're going to do
Get
that,
on
you
camera.
take it one step further, and like he's like the pilot, but then it's also like a Mission Impossible movie as well. So Tom Cruise has to jump from it to something, and you combine the two. And probably do it over Hollywood as well, so that Tom Cruise has a reason aside from the Olympics to go and touch the Hollywood sign, which he had to get. As far as I know, he had to get very special permission to go and touch the Hollywood sign because it is illegal normally.
But who's going to say no to Tom Cruise, really?
Yeah.
Another idea is as a gag, try and redo the Howard Hughes crash, but then it's hard to control a crash, and so you just recreate it instead.
Yes. Now I've just got an image now of a plane going down, and possibly Sam will get this. I'm thinking of the one episode of Red Dwarf with the kind of mock-up Ace Rimmer adventure at the start, where there's a bad, it's meant to be like a Nazi, and he's on a plane kind of accosting him, and he's got a pet alligator, the bad Nazi has. And when he escapes, he looks round, and Ace is kind of riding the alligator down like a surfboard in midair. It is amazing, like television. And I can see Harrison Ford doing that, considering it's kind of, all the inspirations are the same. So that's what I want.
Yes. Okay. And then this isn't a question, but Sam also mentioned that Kieran sent us a clip of a broccoli joke that Harrison Ford told, and it is very funny.
Oh, but he's just such a surly old man normally these days, and just on the rare occasion where he actually shows he's got a bit of a sense of humour, that little twinkle in his eye, it's a real treat.
It's beautiful. Yeah, most of the time he's so grumpy.
I mean, that's one thing I was going to ask you guys, actually. I mean, how would you describe his kind of star persona, like in general? I think it's changed over years. I think it's always been in the same. I mean, obviously on the interview circuit, he's known as like a difficult, interviewee, isn't he?
He kind of doesn't care. To be honest, just reading up on him, kind of in school, he was kind of said he was very shy and kind of withdrawn. So he probably actually does not want to do any interviews.
Yeah, and he's a very private person as well. He's notoriously doesn't like any kind of questions going towards his kind of private life or anything. He will kind of protect that really kind of passionately.
He's kind of there like, I come on, I do my job, I like doing my job, and I leave again. Like that's all I want.
I would say kind of 80% of his roles probably kind of described as in films that could be described as men reluctantly forced into heroism. Kind of.
Yeah,
they're almost there by kind of luck or circumstance. They've just got to get through it, and just make the best of it.
Yeah, it's very rare that you see him play a bad guy either, which I think is part of it. He's always good, and he obviously he started out as kind of the I want to almost call him the boy next door, kind of character, and then kind of in the late 70s, early 80s, kind of became kind of the charming action hero, but always with a bit of he was never kind of infallible. There was always a I'm trying to find the right word. There was always a kind of not emotion behind it, but there was an empathy. There was a softer side to him. He wasn't the hard as nails person. So you see that in Deckard, you see that in Indiana Jones, you see that a bit in all the others, and that kind of thing. So I think it's that kind of, he can kick ass, but he's also kind of got there's a softer side to him as well, which I think is where you get the balance from.
Well, it doesn't help that when George Lucas was making Star Wars, he was stealing from these types of movies in a sense, but he's kind of Clint Eastwood just for a younger generation of the new Hollywood era. So get the same sort of deal as Eastwood, getting his start on TV, getting breaks in these sort of edgy movies, and then he didn't go into like the directing side as much, but he has always, in my eyes, remained consistent. He's always had that no-nonsense attitude about him. And, he's playing Indiana Jones, like, well into his old age. Like people
a couple of years ago,
Yeah, people cannot let it go, and that says something about society, but it says something about Harrison Ford as well.
I mean, he's revisited all three of his big franchise roles, hasn't he, over the past decades? He come back as Indy, as Han, and as Deckard. So.
Yeah. And it is funny, Jacob, that you mentioning Clint Eastwood, because obviously Clint Eastwood got his start or one of his starts in Rawhide. And when he was doing the odd jobs before American Graffiti, Harrison Ford also was in Rawhide at one point. I don't know whereabouts he was. It's just doing the research that he did appear in Rawhide. So they both appeared in the same show, like a decade apart.
He may have played the villain of the week, talking about him not being a villain. That probably was his role in like Gunsmoke and Rawhide.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I love about Harrison, I'm not sure if it's attributed to the first film he was in, which I send you the clip of. It's on YouTube. It is called, his first film was called Dead Heat on a Merry-Go-Round from 1966. I've no idea what it's about. I've yet to watch it. I just know that was his first film was in. But there's an anecdote.
It has something to do with the military, because he's wearing a military outfit.
Possibly, yeah. But there's, I think it's attributed to that film. But there was a producer that called him up to the office. It was around this time, if not for this particular film. And the producer said to him, essentially, "Kid, you're never going to be a star. Look at Tony Curtis. When Tony Curtis walks onto the screen with 2 bags of groceries, you turn around and go, the audience goes, now that's a movie star." And Harrison Ford turns around and went, "Isn't the audience meant to say, that's a grocery boy?" He probably got fired. It's just like, I think that anecdote and like his first year or two of professional acting does not sum up his entire career, then nothing else does. That is his attitude. It's like, I don't want to be a movie star. I want to be somebody that does a good job in the roles that I'm playing, and sod anyone else. It's great.
I mean, I'm sure, and I didn't read this anywhere, but just based on what he says about movies and the way he was viewing his early career, like acting to him seems to just be a job, and not oh, this is my passion. He's got his passions. He has his life, and acting is
he likes his planes.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's been asked in several interviews about, obviously the new Captain America's just coming out, where he replaces the president who turns into Red Hulk, and they asked him particularly about like the kind of the motion capture kind of character aspect of that and why he wanted to do it, and I think he basically just replied was, "I hadn't done it before. It looked quite fun." So.
Yeah. It's just like everyone else said it was fun to do. I don't know. It looks like it's fun. I want to have some fun. Yeah. I mean, he wasn't. He got into acting very late. Looking through, admittedly, Wikipedia, so don't 100% quote me on it. But I'm sure it's related to 100 other sources.
Is there a citation listed next to this?
I can't remember because I took notes down, so I didn't put my citations on my vague notes. That he was in Ripon College, so he was from Chicago, and he went to college to study philosophy. And essentially, he wasn't incredibly great at college, and essentially needed to do something to prop up some grades. And so he took theatre or drama or whatever, it was acting of some kind. Apparently got most of the way through, and then suddenly realised he had to go up on stage and act, which he wasn't incredibly looking forward to. Went and did it. But my favourite thing, he got thrown out of college 4 days before graduation for plagiarism. Which is, it's like, how are we now considering a hero when he was kind of cheating on all of his college things? It's like the American hero, really? But then there's so I found out some other things again for his kind of early years. He was a lifelong Boy Scout as well, so he got Life Scout, which is the second highest ranking. I was in Scouts, but it was a very small village. We didn't do that much. And he kind of was as a counselor at part of kind of the camps that they got for the reptile study badge. And it was kind of this relation to the Boy Scouts, which is why they made young Indiana Jones a scout in Last Crusade, because he had been it. And then you see loads of things come through as well. So I just watched Witness today, which is the only film he got nominated for an Oscar for. He's been nominated once, Harrison Ford. And in that, there's a section, I'm not sure if it was in the original script, but they find out his character is fairly good at woodwork. Well, he trained as a carpenter, so they want to throw that in as a result. And then since the 80s, he's become a flyer. He's now on like one of the kind of American aviation boards somewhere. Chairman of the Experimental Aircraft Association's Young Eagle program. He got made that in 2004, but he was licensed with lots of planes and things like that. Strange that he's now flying a plane. I mean, he's flown the Millennium Falcon, but obviously that is completely a different type of plane. So a lot
also
of these
fake
earlier years. The Millennium Falcon is not fake. Go wash your mouth out with soap, please. So obviously a lot of these things kind of feed into to later on things he's done. He was a sportscaster and a radio presenter in high school. The first voice on his high school's radio, apparently. So he kind of was in there. His dad was a actor before an advertising executive. I can't find anywhere in about a 15-minute Google search trying to find what his dad, if it was any films or plays or anything like that. I can't find anything. But apparently his dad was an actor, so maybe it was kind of local theatre before moving on to another job. So it's kind of always in the family, but it wasn't really a kind of a passion, if that makes sense. But eventually he decided, you know what, I am going to try and make it. But again, he views it as a job, and he's essentially just gone, look, it doesn't require any special skill. It's hard work, it's patience, and you treat it like a job. And he goes, look, I spent many years as a carpenter having to make a living to feed my family. That's a job. I view acting as a job. Yes, it's fun, but I do it essentially to pay bills. So there isn't any... I guess there is a bit of escapism in there of wanting to be in another character's skin, but it's not like it was a guiding core from when I was 5 years old because of some profound philosophical insight. You know, he acts because it brings in the money and he enjoys doing it, but at the end of the day, it is a job. I'm here to work. And I think that's the kind of dryness which comes across in a lot of his interviews, which is great fun. He's a very dry individual. No nonsense, no messing. Little bit of wit, but not much else there. Not much else there, but he's not. There's no pretension.
Nothing going on upstairs.
I mean, there's more going on upstairs in Harrison Ford than in any of us.
Yeah. So to get into his movies, obviously everybody knows he worked on Star Wars, but before that, he was in George Lucas's second film, and it's a film that makes me long for the times in which George Lucas didn't make Star Wars and maybe just made a few more films before he really made it in the blockbuster space. Or maybe he took that blockbuster money and continued to direct, other movies. But no, didn't happen. Instead, George Lucas made American Graffiti, then made Star Wars, and then just kind of
didn't need to do anything else, really. But he did some producing and idea gathering.
Became a businessman.
Yeah.
He's sitting on beaches with Steven Spielberg going, Steve, we should make some money off Harrison. What do you think?
And like both of them going, haven't we already done that?
We could do it again. Yeah. So George Lucas, back in his youthful, idealistic filmmaker days, he got his buddy Francis Ford Coppola. They're sitting around, probably, still smoking cigars or something, wasting all of the financing,
no money that they have. Yeah,
that Coppola had, and he said that George Lucas needed to make a movie that would appeal to the mainstream audiences. Ironic coming from Francis Ford Coppola, but his buddy George, that's what he implored him to do. And so George was like, I'll make a movie about my childhood in Southern California, driving around in hot rods. And so this is also around the time that like Apocalypse Now is getting kicked around, and George Lucas had already made THX 1138, and This was his next project, which hopefully would not be a failure. By the way, was it? Let's find out if it wasn't a failure, because I forgot. No, it made a lot of money. So good job, George Lucas.
Graffiti.
Yeah, it made $140 million on a sub $1 million budget. So
I was going to say, yeah, it was massively successful.
And yeah, I mean that's what George Lucas was kind of doing at the time. He was making low budget stuff. When he was making Apocalypse, it was going to be all shot in California on handheld black and white, and just kind of scrape by and make this gritty war film. But instead, he went for the nostalgia angle. He wanted to make a movie about his youth that would appeal to people of his generation. And of course, me being a stupid 21st century person, I watched that and go, oh, that's what the 70s were like too, even though the 60s and 70s are very explicitly distinct time periods. But I think that in this film, Lucas does, like, the best thing about it is that he's able to capture the feeling and mood of being a youth in that time period. He sets it, the whole thing to like music from the period, because like the radios are constantly playing in their hot rods, and it's such a cool, one night bottle episode of a film, and with all of its different little vignettes going on. But Harrison Ford. So what Lucas did was he got producer Fred Roos to be the casting agent, or he was a casting agent at this point. He had worked with, what's his name? He had worked with Coppola, and he had worked on the Andy Griffith Show. So that's where they grabbed Ron Howard from, because he was a little kid on that show. And then, he'd now worked on The Godfather and a couple other big time movies. And so, yeah, he's bringing that kind of experience, and through maybe his carpentry work. I don't remember exactly how he hooked up with Roos, but Roos knew Harrison Ford, and that's how Harrison Ford ended up getting cast as Bob Falfa, I believe is his name. Yes, Bob Falfa, or Falfa. And in the original script, Bob Falfa had a buzz cut, but Harrison Ford was like, no, I want to continue getting roles like in my this time period. I'm not cutting my hair. So he wears a Stetson hat throughout the film. There's only one point where he loses it. Kieran alluded, or I don't remember if this is on or off air, but there's a drag race, and he loses his hat in the process. But
hats will become a thing with Harrison over the next 10 years.
Oh. And how do you keep them on your head?
Yes. Also dressing like a cowboy, which he does in this movie. Just kind of generally. I'm pretty sure the costume that Han Solo wears is inspired very specifically by the Searcher's costume that John Wayne has.
Very possibly.
Yeah, it's like the same pants, and he just has a vest with a white shirt. But in this movie, yeah, just a regular button down. But he's barely in it. He's in like 3 or 4 scenes. He's mostly sitting in cars, not with a hairy creature though, with like a good looking young woman, or at one point Ron Howard's girlfriend, and he's got his arm around him, and he's going, what, you that thing got a Hemi in it? Just being arrogant and taunting.
I mean, maybe we should talk a little bit about what American Graffiti actually is. I mean, essentially, it's 70s kids looking back on their teenage years in the 50s, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. 70s kids looking back at the 60s.
Sorry, 60s. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's 62.
So looking back at the decade before, which kind of goes in like this kind of thing about movie kind of cycles, in terms of always looking back and how you recreate like the previous 1 or 2 decades, something like that. And it's essentially it's a loose kind of collection of kind of vignettes of teenagers going about having fun with cars and hanging out in diners, basically, isn't it?
Yeah,
pretty much.
It's Richard Dreyfuss is one of them. He plays Kurt, and he's sort of the good kid, and I keep wanting to call him Richie Cunningham. That's not his name. Ron Howard is Steve, and he's another, just good you know, when you think of the average good suburban white kid, you know, those two are like the stereotype of that. And then you have the nerd. His name is the Toad. That's what people call him. I forget his real name. Terry the Toad. And you know, he's got his story about like coming out of his shell and pretending to be something he's not, and then realizing it's not all worth it in the end. And yeah. Oh, the other guy, John Milner. He's the all right. He's God. Who was Matthew McConaughey? He's that guy, but from the '60s, and not quite as like, I don't know, weird. He's a bit more normal. But yeah, those are the main sort of four guys, and they each have their story involving, you know, women or the girls that they're chasing. Or in Milner's case, he gets stuck with this like 12-year-old who, because he's cruising around trying to pick up girls, and they're like,
that's my favorites of the storylines by some distance. I think it's great.
Yeah, oh, Judy's sister will ride with you. He's like, all right, bring her in, and she gets in the car, and she's annoying. You know, they have these vastly different life experiences, but it's a touching story. And there's a Breakfast Club close too that tells you the fate of all these people, including John dies in a car crash with a drunk driver, and Terry goes off to Vietnam and is missing in action. And it just really underscores like the darkness to come, you know, after this bygone era. And for the two good, you know, good guys, they just become like insurance agents and a writer in Canada, which is its own sort of boring, you know, in the same way that in the Matrix, like it's the worst thing ever to be an office worker with like health benefits and a steady paycheck. You know, it's its own sort of hell to become just an insurance agent when you're a kid with all these dreams and goals and ideas for yourself. Not quite as bad as going to Vietnam and dying, but, you know, its own sort of undermining of youthful hope and aspiration. But, yeah, pretty much the four stories, they kind of intertwine, but mostly they're all separate. You know, they go to like a sock hop, and they drive around looking for the girl in the white Thunderbird, and the radio DJ, the Wolf Man, he's on there, he's talking to people. And yeah, I don't know, the Milner part is where Harrison Ford comes in. He's trying to race Milner, and so he's driving around going, hey, you seen a stupid yellow car? And they're like, no, we haven't seen a stupid yellow car. Okay, well, I want to race that guy. And he's an out-of-towner. He's the only person that doesn't truly fit into this world of, I think it's Modesto is where it's supposed to be taking place. Yeah. But everyone else
it's kind of weird, his obsession with these kids, you know, probably like at least a decade younger than him. You know? Yeah, it's kind of, you think, God, you're a fully grown man, dude. Come on, just get a life.
Where is Modesto, by the way?
It's probably like LA suburb or something. It's definitely Southern California.
Okay, city in California, yeah. Let me find it on the maps. Just so I've got it in my head, because my knowledge of American geography is awful.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, it's kind of out from San Jose inland.
Nice. Where's San Jose relative to like LA?
It's just down the bay from San Francisco.
Oh, so we're in North California, actually. Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know how long it would take me to get from San Jose to Modesto, but just looking from this, maybe an hour. So not massive.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not good at California geography. I don't know where anything is. Yeah, so that's pretty much Harrison Ford's role. Is he's the outsider. He's got the little skull dangling in his rearview mirror. He has a really cool black car that has a big engine that makes a lot of noise. Actually, okay, it's south of Sacramento. There we go. Nice. Very interesting.
From San Jose to Modesto, according to Apple Maps, is about just over 1.5 hours. So 1 hour 35, it reckons at the moment is fastest, but that's from the middle. So yeah,
there
not
you
that
go.
far.
This is why we don't discuss geography. We don't know anything. I think that York is in like the middle of England because I just think of the whole thing as England.
Yeah, I mean it's in the middle of the UK, but not in the middle of England.
I was going to say Scotland's about the same sort of north to south as England, or not far off. So
yeah, whenever he finally does race Milner, he's beating him. You know, it's very much a precursor to Paul Walker versus Vin Diesel, but not quite as cool. And you know, just as Milner's about to hit the nos, Harrison Ford crashes and his car rolls over, and Milner keeps going, "Oh, you know, he would have had me. He would have had me." And Toad disagrees. He thinks that Milner would have won, but no, Harrison Ford was definitely winning by a mile. Crashed his car, but yes, his hat is saved, thankfully. And I mean, I don't know. His character's just kind of there.
Is he meant to have died in that crash, and they just like, well, it was never shown on screen, so we can bring him back for a sequel, kind of thing?
No, I think he's standing next to his car too after the crash.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I vaguely rewatched it, but I remember that Harrison Ford was in it for like 2 scenes, vaguely. So I'm kind of vague.
You know, despite the lack of screen time, you know, it's you do remember his scenes, don't you? I mean, I think straight away he's almost like instant star. You know, your eyes kind of drawn to him. He's an interesting presence. You know.
The trouble is, I don't know if I remember his scenes because he's good in the film, or because it's Harrison Ford and I know Harrison Ford now. You know, there are going to be films that you only remember because they've got big stars in. After they become a big star, and you look back and go, "Oh, there he is," you know, and they stand out. Whereas, like, the lead could be like a much bigger part, but you don't remember it just because they weren't as big a star later on. So it's not taking anything away from his scenes and everybody else's. I just don't know if the reason I remember his scenes is because I know Harrison Ford rather than the performance.
Well, and the film was critically acclaimed at the time. Obviously, Lucas was associated with Coppola and was known in that sphere. I know Ebert liked it, and somebody else. Who else? Canby, that was the other one.
Well, they got nommed for 5 Oscars, put it that way. So.
Yeah, that too. And Harrison Ford, like, yeah, he's in a bit part, but like he's obviously good. He's just very casually playing this cocky race car driver who just wants to drive around and challenge people to races. And it really reminds me of like what Han Solo would probably be like if he was driving around space challenging people to races.
Yeah, I mean, this is very much like his first few films, definitely his cocky era, aren't they? You know, just so from this role in American Graffiti, through Han Solo, and then you get to Indy, and he's sort of dialed it back a little bit more. He's sort of a bit more reserved, or a bit more kind of self-aware, I suppose.
Yeah. And then you get to later on, and he becomes a lot more gruff and
yeah.
I'm sure anybody watching this in '73 was going, that Harrison Ford guy could be a star. You know, if nothing else, he's very handsome and he has charisma. So I'm not sure what else it takes to be a movie star other than that. But obviously I have the massive benefit of hindsight and every important role that he ever played.
Well, I mean, it kind of was a big film at the time, but it didn't like start to land in massive roles. And he didn't make a lot of money from it either. I think I saw somewhere he made about $400 from it, which I've no idea about the inflation, but won't be that much.
It's 1.2 million in 2025 dollars.
Well, it's going to be maybe, I don't know, $10,000, something like that max, realistically, because it was only 50 years ago.
The cars in the 1962 movie cost about $1,000, so.
Yeah, so it's not masses, and from that kind of, because of his association, well, Coppola produced American Graffiti, so he gets the smaller part in The Conversation, and then he's not in anything until Star Wars.
Yeah.
So it's not like being in this, he massively took off out of nowhere, despite the fact the film was up for 5 Oscars and it made it was like one of the most profitable movies ever made at the time, kind of thing. It didn't immediately kickstart his career.
Yeah. But the best thing it did was get him in touch with George Lucas, obviously, and
Coppola.
Yeah. And surely the most, like, in my opinion, the best part of this movie is the parts where Kurt is going around and causing trouble with the local hoods, the pharaohs. They're like the tunnel snakes in Fallout, but actually in the 50s. And I love watching him go around and like cover for them and do some what's the term? Some shenanigans. Just some lighthearted, fooling with cops and little pranks, nothing too serious. Just robbing some pinball machines. And then also I like Terry driving around trying to get alcohol and impress his girlfriend and stuff like that. Wrecking, I keep wanting to call him Richie, wrecking Ron Howard's car. Yep. It's a fun movie with teen shenanigans that turns very dark when you remember that Vietnam happens very soon after.
Yeah. And that's kind of the point. It's capturing a whimsy that I think it only works, and obviously it was made during Vietnam going on. It goes on for another 2 years, something like that, into 75, somewhere around there. So and I think it's made deliberately because of Vietnam. That's the entire point, that these are the lives of people doing stuff that are not incredibly mischievous. They're having fun. They're being normal people. You know that in 2 years' time or whatever it's going to be, Vietnam starts 65, 66, somewhere around there. That they are going to be drafted.
And it is like the end of their innocence, isn't it? Yeah, these final kind of sunny times before many dark years to come.
Yep.
And it's definitely not like Harrison Ford will appear in a very famous Vietnam movie in a couple of years' time after this. So, and obviously considering the fact that you said that Coppola was thinking about Apocalypse Now, if not at this time, but in the very soon in the future, and he produced this.
At this point, Lucas and Milius were like actively planning it and like working on it.
Yeah.
And he was also writing a script for some mysterious sci-fi opera that he was developing.
Well, that was Lucas, yeah.
Yeah.
But so the fact that they are actively working on Apocalypse Now whilst producing this means that the chances that it's not deliberately trying to cotton on to Vietnam at the time is, the chances of that are reduced. It's still possible that it was completely accidental. I don't know. I haven't done massive research in kind of interviews and stuff at the time, but it definitely. I think it actually realistically only works when you put it into that context. Other than that, it's a very good kind of running around, fun, innocent times kind of thing. But it doesn't elevate it anything more than that. When you put it into the context of Vietnam, I think that is when the kind of black cloud gives it a weight and a heft which is not there otherwise.
And the eschewing of like a traditional score too is cool. I don't know how many movies were doing that at that time. I'm sure this wasn't the first one to incorporate, pop music as kind of the soundtrack to the film, but it does it so extensively.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very new Hollywood idea, isn't it, really? Which isn't very much a part of that.
Doing the hop and Chuck Berry and that kind of 50s, 60s rock and roll.
It's actually classified by Google as a / musical. So that is one of its genres.
You wouldn't have thought that, would you? George Lucas does a musical.
No. I mean, so are you saying that every Tarantino film is also a musical?
Yes.
By the way, one note on the casting director and future producer Fred Roos. He would go on to do Godfather 2, The Conversation, Apocalypse Now. His final film was Megalopolis. So, I mean, I guess he did a good job casting it.
And getting people involved. Yeah, you don't have to do that much.
I mean, getting John Voight in to play John Voight, genius move.
Yep. So, I mean, great job casting it, Fred Roos. He unfortunately died 4 days before his 90th birthday. May 18th, 2024. His birthday was on the 22nd. So, R.I.P. Fred Roos. I mean, we've already done a lot of your movies. Otherwise, I'd say let's do a Frank Roos episode. Or Fred Roos.
And I don't know, was he casting Star Wars specifically? Because it was Fred Roos that... The story goes that
Fred Roos did not do Star Wars. He was more a Coppola guy.
Okay, but the story that Harrison Ford happened to be working nearby when Star Wars was going is kind of not true, but kind of is, because there's also the story that Fred Roos kind of went, I reckon you should be in things. If you happen to be working here at the time, it's possible that Lucas will remember you. And therefore, it's possible that he'll get you to do stuff as well. So it was...
Yeah, I've seen some accounts that ever since American Graffiti, Lucas was kind of making use of not just for the carpentry jobs, but just for general kind of running around and doing
George,
stuff in the studio with him.
Harrison, I need a foot massage.
Happened to be there. He literally he kind of brought him in as part of the casting team and said, look, just read the script of these hopefuls and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah,
then, but it was like the charisma he was bringing just from reading the other lines in the script. I thought, actually, maybe I should give you a go and try it out.
Yeah, he kind of did that, but apparently from one source, it was kind of Fred Roos that kind of convinced Harrison to kind of just happen to lurk around there, and maybe Lucas will consider trying to bring you in. So it's kind of an orchestration from the Roos point of view.
I bet there was also there was probably a scheme from George Lucas where he said, "Oh, Harrison would be cheaper than Al Pacino and Kurt Russell and Nick Nolte." Yep, okay, Harrison it is.
Yeah. It's amazing that you have two best mates of Coppola and Lucas who have such opposite considerations at that point when it comes to financing things.
Yeah.
So you get around to 77 and Harrison Ford goes stratospheric, essentially, because of Star Wars. And he is also in, what else is he in that year that I'm like, he's in a film called Heroes.
Classic.
Exactly. You've heard of Star Wars, yeah. He's in Force 10 to Navarone the year after, but then in 79 he's in Hanover Street, Frisco Kid, more American Graffiti, which does not have a good reputation. I didn't realize that was a film.
Uncredited cameo also.
Yeah. And then he's also in Apocalypse Now. The thing with Apocalypse Now is he won Coppola. Congratulations. Coppola wanted Harrison Ford to be a much bigger role, but they've been filming for a year. Harrison Ford has already heard about the hell that's going on. Didn't want to be stuck out in like Cambodia or whatever filming. So went, I will do it if I have a tiny role.
Yeah, but basically both of his roles in a couple of films. So Conversation and Apocalypse Now, he's just guy in room. Speaks the main character for
Lucas.
For a few minutes.
I was gonna say yes, it's G. Lucas. Whoever would have thought it, but I mean, ignoring 78, he does. It's a ridiculous run for like 7 odd years, nearly 10. So in 77 he's in Star Wars, obviously, makes his reputation. 78 is in Force 10 from Navarone, which nobody has ever heard of. Maybe it's got some thing. 67%, not the greatest. Roger Ebert gave it 2.5 out of 4. It's a middling. But then, along with everything else, is in Apocalypse Now in 79. Empire Strikes Back in 1980, Raiders of the Lost Ark in 81, Blade Runner 82, Return of the Jedi 83, Indiana Jones Temple of Doom 84. Then he's in Witness in 85 and gets his Oscar nom. Like it's insane the run he does now. Looking back at it, 86. He's in Mosquito Coast. I've never heard of.
That's really good, actually. That's the other Peter Weir film that's not Witness that he did with him.
Oh, okay.
But by the way, Force.
In fact, that's an interesting one because it's one of his rare, almost villain roles. He's definitely the antagonist. I don't know if you call him a villain, but basically plays a very unstable guy and is quite like a survivalist, basically. It's quite interesting.
Then he's in Polanski's Frantic, but that's probably why he signed the thing to kind of what's the word? Roman Polanski isn't a bad guy kind of thing.
Yes.
Open letter that he did,
as many actors did.
Yeah.
But by the way, for Force 10 from Navarone, it's the sequel to The Guns of Navarone with Gregory Peck.
Which I have heard of.
And it stars Harrison Ford, Carl Weathers, and Franco Nero is in it.
Okay.
Yeah. But like aside from that, which kind of people may have vaguely tangentially heard of, there's nearly a 10-year run of just like he's in something massive every year. Admittedly, a couple of them are franchise films, and it's like 3 Star Wars movies, 2 Indiana Jones movies. But it's just a like if there was ever a kind of period of time when an actor is in like hit after hit after hit, this is one of the runs realistically in a 10-year period, where it's just like the amount of money you must have made off that is insane.
I looked it up. He makes like $12 to $65 million a film. Like, I couldn't find how much he specifically made for Captain America, but I have to imagine it was way too much for what he does in the role.
Yeah, I'm hearing reviews that it's not a great movie. I'm expecting the SFX is probably not great either, and maybe that's because most of the budget to pay the SFX guys went to Harrison Ford.
I mean, it's $180 million movie. Yeah, so you got to think how much of that will be going to Harrison. Let's put it this way: Harrison Ford will be paid many times more than the lead, Anthony Mackie.
Yes.
180 is not bad for a Marvel blockbuster these days. That they made that on the cheap.
Yeah, it's not egregious, I suppose, by their standards.
Yeah, but you could make about 2.5 Lord of the Rings movies for that money.
So, Kieran, which of those Harrison Ford movies are you talking about?
This is the best I've got.
Oh God, Kieran's about to tell us why the wage gap is a myth.
No, I'll take that off. I've had this for years and suddenly remembered, oh my God, I have a hat. Indiana Jones, because I wanted to feel better at the moment to see a white guy standing up for things that are right and punching Nazis in the face, which he does copiously throughout this movie. Whee! This is what we all want. So the story is that Spielberg really in the 70s wanted to direct a Bond movie, and he got turned down partly because he was American, and there is a kind of rule until Fukugawa that all the Bond films have to be directed by somebody that is British.
What if he got a British passport?
Yeah, but he also had it directed by Kiwis and by a Swiss guy at one point as well. So they've got rid of that rule over time, I think.
We're letting Fruit and Cheese direct now. I can't believe it.
But yeah, it was a kind of almost predominantly British thing, and even though Spielberg had done Jaws and Close Encounters, he'd done a couple of big things, but he wasn't like the massive franchise guy, so it was kind of they're a bit iffy. And so apparently he was kind of on a beach kind of getting really annoyed about this, and George Lucas came up to him and went, well, don't worry, because I've got an idea for essentially James Bond, but is better than James Bond. And this
I thought you were going to do Michael Caine then. Hang on, lads, I've got a great idea.
I've got a great idea about this. Hold on, lads. We will do Italian Job at some point. The proper Italian Job. The one and only.
We'll have to do Michael Caine, won't we? And one of us
crappy remake. Yeah, Jaws 4, somebody. No. So he comes up between George Lucas and Spielberg and a couple of the other guys, other people around. So the screenplay is by Lawrence Kasdan, who also co-wrote Empire Strikes Back, Force Awakens, Solo, but a lot of those things. And so the story is by George Lucas and Philip Kaufman. Philip Kaufman is one of those names that you go, I know the name. What did he do? And then you look through the list and you go, okay, he directed the Body Snatchers remake. He worked on Raiders of the Lost Ark. He
the Right Stuff was his big one, wasn't it?
Yeah, The Right Stuff as well. Twisted, he did later on, but so he's done some stuff. Kind of stopped. Is he dead now? He might be.
I think he is.
No, he's just very old, 88, and decided I'm not going to bother working, which is fair and bloody enough.
That's more of a rarity these days. That just old guys decide I'm old, so I'm going to retire.
I'm going to go fishing.
Doesn't happen very often in Hollywood.
If only some of them would, the world would be a better place.
All credit to him. 2 years ago, Peter Weir said he was when he hit 80. He said, "No, I'm not directing anymore."
Well, there's the thing.
I'm just going to retire to a beach.
To be fair, Indiana Jones doesn't either. So
what, retire? Yeah. There's also the thing that Jim Carrey recently, came back for Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and before that he said, I'm not coming back at all, and I'll only come out if somebody gets me a gold script. And apparently the producers of Sonic the Hedgehog printed out his script in like carrot gold ink and delivered it to his doorstep. They're like, you want that? We will do it for you.
They also wrote a large number on the check that was inside.
Yeah. So, obviously Raiders got an awful lot of kudos behind it, produced by Frank Marshall as well, who now kind of runs Lucasfilm, or is one of them, because his wife is Kathleen Kennedy, who probably more people know about. And essentially Raiders is kind of James Bond, but also kind of a riff off the matinee serials that both Lucas and Spielberg watched when they were younger. So if anyone somehow doesn't know what the matinee serials were, it was essentially TV, but in cinemas. So you went in for the next kind of 20-minute installment every week, and you'd go back and there'd be another installment, and it was usually kind of somebody, a kind of macho guy, and there's a big overarching thing of some terrorist or killer or invader from somewhere, and they'd go out and they'd try investigating, and normally there'd be like a 3-minute punch-up at the end, followed by a cliffhanger, and the next episode would resolve the cliffhanger. The middle of the episode would be them giving the next bit of plot point, and then they'd go, and there'd be another punch-up that will cut right on the cliffhanger again, and you just keep going and going and going like that.
Back in days when people were going to the cinema every Saturday without fail.
Yeah, notably, there is a serial called The Phantom Creeps, starring Bela Lugosi, which is known for 3 things. 1, for Bela Lugosi, 2, for the robot, which is awesome, and 3, because at the start of each episode there was essentially they used a projector to project some text scrolling up the screen to give you a recap on what had happened the episode before if you hadn't caught it. And this is where Lucas got the idea for the title crawl for Star Wars from. It wasn't original. He directly nicked it, again, from these matinee serials.
He wasn't original, is George Lucas's.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Do you think Spielberg would have used a crawl for Indy if Lucas hadn't done it before for Star Wars?
It's the kind of thing he would have done. And actually, as I was watching it today, rewatching it, because I haven't seen it, I've seen it like 15, 20 times in the younger years, and then not bothered because it's like, I know Indiana Jones, like, I used to, my box set is here, and as I was saying to you guys earlier, my copy of Raiders, I put it in the disk drive, and it went, this disc is pretty much dead, disc not recognized.
This disc belongs in a museum.
Yeah, pretty much, or in the dumpster. I'm not quite sure which.
It's covered in Nazi dust.
Yeah, definitely not Nazi gold anymore. So I watched it enough times, but now looking back on it, I'm actually thinking that one of the inspirations may have been. Either of you heard of a writer called Dennis Wheatley?
Yeah, I've heard of him.
So the film that you may know that he did is The Devil Rides Out. So that's based off one of his books. And he was a novelist in the 30s, then going into the 40s, and he's very well connected. So he wrote these things with the Duke of Richelieu, and then wrote 2 of his films are called 2 of his books even. One's called The Satanist, and before that was a film called To the Devil a Daughter, and both To the Devil a Daughter and The Devil Rides Out got made by Hammer in their later years. But one of his series is called it features an adventurer called Gregory Sallust. I've read 2 or 3 of them. There's a hell of a lot down on my shelf because there was a point when I kind of half thought about reading a load of them to submit for a call for papers on him. I was going to compare it to James Bond, which they've said Gregory Sallust has an influence on James Bond. Might have been at the time. I just didn't have time to read them all. I'd got stuff on. So I've read 2 or 3 of them, and especially near in the last one he does. Essentially, it's set during the war, and because he was a fairly well-known writer of these kind of sensationalist kind of action thrillery kind of popular fiction, he was recruited by the war cabinet to essentially write both propaganda stories and come up with kind of story writing for schemes to try and outwit the Nazis. And
is he the guy that came up with we kill or take a dead soldier, refrigerate him, send him in a car really fast
with the briefcase?
Yes, so that the Nazis find his dead body.
With the documents.
Yes.
I'm not sure if he was specifically involved in that one, but that was the kind of thing they were asking him to do, along with writing all these Gregory Sallust stories, and where essentially it's kind of each version we send him back into occupied territory to do something and then bring him back out, and then you go in and out, and it's those kind of things of, you know, work for the secret agencies, go in and take these things. And
that was Operation Mincemeat, by the way.
Yes, there was a film that came out about that a couple of years ago.
Is this been no, that's a different guy. Never mind. I can't tell which I can't tell what weirdo came up with that plan though.
No, but the writer was Dennis Wheatley, and he also did because he was well known for things like The Satanist and The Devil Rides Out. He kind of championed a lot of kind of. So I've got a couple of books that are in kind of the Dennis Wheatley occult library kind of thing, where you get reprints of all these kind of devilish kind of pulp novels that are being reprinted under his brand. But yeah, as I was just watching this, something kind of twigged that is very Indiana Jones. Of you have somebody working for some kind of government going in to fight against the Nazis, have a couple of punch-ups, you know, that kind of thing. And considering people have thought that those stories were an influence on Bond, and obviously Spielberg was very much inspired by Bond and taken from that, I was watching, I'm going, I wonder if there is a connection going back, because it essentially is swap out a British Secret Service for a American archaeologist, and the story's probably not that far off. And especially when you go to Last Crusade and then Dial of Destiny that came out a couple of years ago.
And it's very much consciously set in that era as well, you know, with the ready-made baddies that the Nazis are, you know, and then you can just insert whatever kind of archaeological, mythological MacGuffins you like in that loose structure and just make a movie out of it, essentially.
It's fairly easy and fairly fun. If people like that kind of thing, please go check out Danger 5. It's one of the greatest series ever made. It's hilarious.
So I think Spielberg says, you know, kind of why Nazis, you know, for that, and I think he says, well, you don't need to explain why we're fighting them. You know, it's just you know, it's just evident, you know, that they will always be the bad guys.
There's that, and I mean, I'm half tempted to write or try and do some research for a paper in months to come when I have the time on why, when you get to the 70s and 80s, in kind of pulp kind of genre fiction and then films as well, so like Indiana Jones, but horror novels do it quite a lot as well. Like 1 out of every 4 or 5, there's some kind of Nazis as the bad guys, and I think it's probably a lot of the people writing that stuff would have either just been born at the end of the war or just in the middle of it. So even if they weren't born in the middle of it.
Yeah, I mean, I watched Marathon Man for the first time the other week. You know, again, that's very much, you know, so obviously it's contemporary set, but you know, it's a Nazi in hiding, you know, coming back after all these years, you know, and still kind of up to his old tricks and stuff, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was thinking of this when I was reading a couple of James Herbert novels. I had sort of 3 or 4 on the shelf at the end of the year and ran through them all. He was born in 43. So, he would have had that, if not experiencing it himself. He was born in Britain, so you've got all the rationing kind of at the end of the war. Nazism is very much prevalent on his growing up and his imprint. So as soon as you get to write these things, it's going to go into your fiction, because even though you weren't kind of fighting the war had a massive kind of impact on your growing up. And I'm wondering if obviously Spielberg and Lucas were of that generation. I don't know exactly when their birthdays were.
I mean, they would have
born in 44, and Spielberg was born in wiki 46.
Even
so again,
without being in the actual, like, alive and conscious of World War II, like their parents were. They're influenced by it and the media that came out of it and all of that.
So you're going to have, and by the time you get to write these things, you're going to draw upon your kind of childhood bad guys. And for I will say just Anglosphere writers, because I don't know how this would reflect in Germany or Italy or blah blah blah. I just don't know. But at least in Britain and America, probably your go-to bad guys, Nazis are going to be the bad guys as much as Dracula and all of these kind of myths. They are going to become myths and folktales at a certain point in time, because you're going to live right on the edge of it. So I think that's probably a reason why around this time you have so many Nazis coming back. And also, as you said, nobody needs to know why punching a Nazi is good and why the Nazis are the bad guys. They just are,
They were contemporaneously
gone
too,
by the wayside in recent years, but
in like the comic books of that era too, there were Nazis that were bad guys. So
and it's fairly obvious these are the bad guys. You punch them in the face whenever you get the chance.
All right,
yeah, and
Kieran, tell us about Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones is a globe-trotting archaeologist professor at Is it Oxford? I think he's at Oxford or Cambridge or something like that.
He's in the States, isn't he? Isn't it one of the American universities? I don't remember which one though.
Marshall College, a fictional university in the Indiana Jones film franchise.
So we don't know. Sorry, I think he's Britain just because in this, and then is it Crystal Skull? It's Jim Broadbent, I think it is.
Yes, yeah. So Jim Broadbent and John Hurt, their characters I think were from Oxford, and Brody as well. They're all Brits who ends up in the States after meeting and studying at Oxford, I think.
And the guy who kind of runs the college in this one, I think he's got an English accent, if nothing else.
Yeah. So,
is that Brody? Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Denholm Elliott. Yeah. Hello. Does anyone speak English?
So it kind of feels it, and you've got all the wood paneling. So anyway,
if you want more information, the Indiana Jones wiki has an entire Marshall College article that begins with, in 1772, the institute that would become Marshall College started as a prep school.
I was going to say, it's going to have been expanded in like Young Indiana Jones and all this kind of thing, isn't it? And the games and various Lego Indiana Jones probably has it somewhere.
There's some deep lore for Marshall College.
Yeah, but yeah, he gets tasked to essentially try and find people, because the Nazis might be trying to find the Ark of the Covenant, which is the tablet that housed the Ten Commandments, the actual Ten Commandments from Christianity, because God actually exists in this universe,
from Judaism,
along with aliens. Christianity, Judaism, yep. Like,
Moses was a Jew.
Judeo-Christian.
Proper Old Testament shit.
Yeah. Power of God or some shit. And so he goes on a globe-trotting adventure, trying to foil the Nazis and make sure they don't get their hands on mystical artifacts, and dig up kind of old relics and go to tombs in Egypt and fight all that kind of stuff. And it's a proper old adventure with Harrison Ford with a whip and a Stetson, punching people and having fun and swinging around old tombs and proper classic adventure stuff. I don't know how do you not know what Indiana Jones is, people?
I mean, it's got one of the all-time great character introductions. I think kind of the build, kind of making you wait for the proper reveal of him. You see him from the back at first, and you see his hat, and just the right moment. He's just something cool, and then steps into the light.
It is great. Yeah, and it's weird because that opening 10, 12 minutes, has. The point of that realistically is actually not to introduce Indiana Jones. It's to introduce Belloc. But you could find a way to do that in about 2 minutes elsewhere. Yeah. But they also go, let's just have a hellish fun cold open. Do we actually need this for the rest of the plot? No, not really. Why are we doing it? Well, we can have a massive boulder roll down and things like that. And I guess it shows off his athleticism and things like that and his kind of deep need to do this. But realistically, in terms of the plot of the film, you don't need that.
It's an introduction to Indiana Jones, the action adventure film. This is what's in store: is booby traps and boulders and indigenous people with blow darts, treachery.
And go straight from that to focusing back with his day job.
Just glasses.
Just trying to teach a load of students, and all the girls in the room.
I love you on their eyelids and blink them at him. Amazingly good fun. But it's obviously when it came out, it wasn't called Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then they did another one we're going to have to actually name this now. They're all the Indiana Jones films, and then we'll give them a subtitle later on. So it became Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
The thing that always throws me, I always forget about until I remember it, is that Temple of Doom, the follow-up, is technically a prequel. It's set the year before, isn't it? So,
I'm not sure if it's the year before or a couple of years before, but it's set in.
I've never watched it in that context. I've never watched Raiders thinking about.
I believe Raiders is 35, and then I think Temple of Doom is 32, 33, I think, and then Last Crusade is 39.
Yeah.
And whenever I rewatch it again, I'm going to watch it. I'm going to watch Temple of Doom first, and then I'll watch Raiders and see if that changes any of my perceptions.
Yeah, and obviously we have Spielberg pretty much single-handedly. Again, moving on from Raiders, because I think we talked about it enough. And Raiders is amazing in almost every capacity, pretty much every capacity. People go, they don't make movies like they did. We don't make movies like that anymore, kind of thing. Aside from the ones that are legacy sequels in the franchise, Raiders is one that I will look at and go, they genuinely don't make movies like this anymore. No. There is a magic.
Not enough people's faces melt. We need more of that.
Well, there's a magic in the early trilogy, and it's kind of the second one. Well, Spielberg, realistically, between Temple of Doom and Gremlins, which he produced, that kind of got the US to bring in censorship, because originally you had kind of X and non-rated, and then it was this isn't an X film, let's bring the 5-year-olds to go see Temple of Doom, and you go, this probably should not be shown to a 5-year-old
for life.
And then you go see Gremlins.
Let's be clear.
Should not be shown.
American movies were censored long before that.
They ushered in the modern censorship system, which is still in place today.
Yes.
The film rating system, should we say, rather than a censorship.
Parental guidance.
Yes. And obviously the second one brought on in his first role Ke Huy Quan, who did Goonies and then worked in stunts and got forgotten for ages.
Who I'm still flabbergasted they didn't get back for Dial of Destiny, even for a cameo.
To be honest, if they'd have shot it 2 years later,
after
everything everywhere,
it wouldn't have tied up timeline wise, would it?
Not so short anymore.
Not so short. Not so short. No, okay. And to be honest, that's kind of the greatest thing. And you get the thing that apparently Steven Spielberg sent Ke Huy Quan a Christmas card in '84 and has done ever since. Every single year he gets a thing from Steven Spielberg. And so it's actually really heartwarming to see like his Oscars acceptance speech when Spielberg sat in the crowd there and he's like, "I hired you when you were about 7. Oh my God, you're winning Oscars now."
But also during that Oscar campaign, him reconnecting with Harrison Ford as well, and then just against him famously, and Harrison seems so happy for him, finally getting his recognition all these years later.
I will say on Temple of Doom, it's not the most racially sensitive film in the world.
No.
Not the most culturally sensitive.
Yeah. I mean, at a certain point you go, it's the 80s. At a certain point you go, that's kind of par for the course for these kind of matinee serial kind of adventure stories. And at a certain point you go, this isn't great, really. There is a thing where you do have to slightly disconnect. It's not that it's unenjoyable, but you do realize it's there and go, okay, we're going to have to make a conscious effort to overlook this at the moment. But and then obviously Last Crusade comes out and people argue whether Last Crusade is better than Raiders.
Okay, here's the thing for me. I'd say Raiders is the best film, just quality wise in terms of what it's contributes to cinema. Last Crusade might be my favorite, and it's the one that generally affects me emotionally. So
agree.
Raiders is kind of technically the best. Temple of Doom I think is the one I watched the most as a kid. But I think
this says a lot about Kieran.
But I enjoy part of that maybe that when I was about 7 or 8, I got taken to Disneyland Paris, and they'd got the Indiana Jones ride there, which is the roller coaster based off Temple of Doom with the carts, and I was too short to ride it. So I think because I was like 8 or 9. And I think kind of rewatching Temple of Doom was kind of, this is the nearest I'll get to riding that. I don't know. That's my Freudian take on it.
I thought you were going to say you watched an immigrant eat somebody's heart or something. So this went in a better direction.
No, I think a lot of it actually was kind of the minecart chase. I liked the chase, the roller coaster aspect. But I will say that Last Crusade there are perfect endings to trilogies, and this is as close as you're going to get. It's like if they never made another one, you would not be complaining because it works as its own. You have the original trilogy that's on its own, and then you have Crystal Skull, which we kind of say is there sometimes, and then Dial of Destiny is not up to the original 3. But it's incredibly underappreciated and genuinely a fun time, if not.
I still have fun with Crystal Skull. I know it's had a lot of criticism over the years, but I still think it's a decent, good time at the movies. It just gets a bit can lose its way, probably mostly in its final act. So
South Park's take is a bit extreme, but I mean they're not wrong.
And Dial of Destiny, I thought was fine. It's the most 5 out of 10 movie I've ever seen, I think.
Yeah. And Harrison Ford has come out on a record going, I don't care that it flopped. I asked them to do it because I wanted to play Indiana Jones one final time, and they said yes.
But it's got some really nice kind of moments, kind of, dealing with the legacy of the character and everything. And I've not been back to it, but I will do it at some point. It's an interesting film at the very least.
I mean, one of the things I did.
Went in.
Yeah, and the reshoots, which are obvious. That's not good. But the thing I did is that I actually sat and waited for the entire credits to go, because at the point it was coming out, John Williams had said, "This is the final score I will do." So I'm like, I don't give a damn. I am going to sit here and listen to it, because it may be we never get another John Williams score in the cinema again. So I am doing this. It's like I don't care if it's just a couple of violins in the background. I'm doing the entire score. But yeah, Harris. I don't think these films would have worked if it hadn't been Harrison Ford. You can put anybody else in that and it wouldn't work. Going forward, they may do spin-offs.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm surprised they haven't tried to do a Disney Plus Phoebe Waller-Bridge spin-off from Dial of Destiny already. But you'd have a hard time convincing Disney execs that a female-led series will work.
Or
even though
a
Yeah.
young Indiana Jones like reboot. You just recast him. Nobody would be
Yeah,
offended by that.
I mean that might have happened. It might have been a young spin-off if Shia LaBeouf hadn't turned out to be
Shia LaBeouf. Yeah. But yeah, there's some like roles that you can't get, and part of it is because they're so fixed in the cultural consciousness that it's hard to imagine anybody else doing it. With Indiana Jones, I don't think anybody else would have been able to do it. I think it is the perfect casting at the perfect time. I don't know anybody else, even now, that would have been able to do it and pull it off.
I mean, they wanted Tom Selleck, didn't they? And if they could have got it to work with this Magnum PI schedule, it may have been him, which would have been. I don't want to say it would have been bad, but it wouldn't have been. It would have been different. It wouldn't. I don't think it would have had the staying power really.
What about Humphrey Bogart in a time machine?
What, the treasure of Sierra Ark?
He wouldn't have done the stunts.
It would have. He would have been like Robert De Niro in Irishman.
I'm going to de-age him. No, I mean there's a couple.
Yeah, I mean Harrison Ford. You know, though he broke through in properly broke through in his 40s. You know, he's always been very physically capable. You know, and just throw himself into things. And whereas Humphrey Bogart I think he was born 60.
Yeah, no, that's about right. Like, whenever you imagine him, he's exactly the same age.
It belongs in a museum.
Like, and to be honest, in the nicest way, you only ever think of him as being in films from like 35 to 43.
Yeah.
Like, I can't think of any other films that he's in outside that range, or if they do, they're kind of fleeting. Oh, yeah, that exists.
Well, he's dead by the early 50s. So that's
yeah, but you know what I mean. Like even sort of 47, 48, haven't got a clue. 30, 31, 32, haven't got a clue.
I mean, we did talk about this on our Humphrey Bogart episode. He basically had a few years of playing like the heavy, you know, kind of throwaway kind of villain roles in like the late 30s. Then they realised, he's quite an interesting leading man. And
I made the Kessel Run in 12 parsecs.
And then basically, that's kind of his hot period is like 1940 to like later in that decade, basically. As well.
Yeah, so
6 or 7
Maltese
years
Falcon, Sierra Madre, Casablanca. You know, it all comes in one. Yeah. No, the few things that I like about a few tidbits quickly before we move from Indiana Jones. One, they had to delay shooting because the studio they were going to use for the Well of Souls was being used for The Shining. Which is where Spielberg and Kubrick became good friends in the next 20 years. And the delay for that was they were using it for the Colorado Lounge in The Shining, where the typewriter is and the stairs are in that big room. But there was obviously very famously a fire on that set for The Shining. So the whole thing went up and they had to rebuild the entire thing. And also, Kubrick was never known for speedily going through his filming process. Really, so that kept getting shifted back, and then also leading on to Blade Runner, which I will not discuss, even though obviously Blade Runner is my favorite film ever. There's this story that Ridley Scott had asked for Harrison Ford to have a meeting, so he was in England, whereas they were shooting it. I'm guessing it was Elstree or Pinewood. They were shooting Indiana Jones. Harrison Ford goes straight from work to meet Ridley Scott. Turns up in his Indiana Jones hat, which obviously isn't a problem because Indiana Jones isn't a thing yet. It's not like, oh my god, it's Indiana Jones. Like he just turns up in the hat. Ridley Scott looks and goes, "Damn, I wanted to use that hat for Deckard. Now everyone's just gonna see Indiana Jones. I can't use the hat now. God damn it." But yeah, so after Indiana Jones, he obviously continues to do Return of the Jedi. He does the other films. Indiana Jones films in that decade. Does Witness as well, which gets him his only Academy Award nom. Goes through a load of films into the 90s. Plays Jack Ryan a couple of times because obviously, and we did Jack Ryan for the James L. Jones episode as well. So there's obviously lots of connections there.
Alec Baldwin,
Yeah,
Jack Ryan.
he's the only actor in films to play the role twice, because he had Alec Baldwin doing it once and Affleck doing it once and Chris Pine doing it once. But
yeah, he was also in The Fugitive, which is very well known and well respected. From what I remember, it's a very fun film. Sabrina, and then in 1997 we get to both The Devil's Own and then Air Force One.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which, Sam, you want to introduce Air Force One? We are very long episode, this one, but
yeah, I mean, so as you say, he had a very successful 80s and lots of involvement in things that became, very successful, kind of iconic franchises. And then he gets to the 90s, where I think his persona's changing slightly. I think he's more of a kind of a straight edge kind of leading man by this point. But as we've kind of touched upon, he's got that kind of that wryness, that kind of slight kind of prickliness to him. It makes it a bit more interesting than like the standard kind of leading man figure, I'd say. I'd argue that The Fugitive, from this kind of era, from like the basically through the 90s, Fugitive is probably his best film from this era. But Air Force One might be the most fun, just park your brain at the door, silly fun of them all, really.
Yeah, I will say, if we don't get to it, because this is our last of our 3 films, therefore the rest are going to be kind of vaguely skimmed over. I will say, if people haven't seen it, K-19, The Widowmaker, that he's in, from Catherine Bigelow, is a very, very good film, and he has said it's one of his favorite and possibly the best things he's ever done. It's a very good film. Please go watch that. Sorry, 2002. That's from.
Cool.
Very underappreciated. It's got Liam Neeson and Peter Skarsgård in it as well. Very good film.
Cool. So basically, the plot of this is Kazakh terrorists hijack Air Force One, and the president, played by Ford, has to fight back Die Hard style in order to save his family. So yes, it's Die Hard on Air Force One, essentially.
Die Hard on a plane.
And it's the latest in a long line of Die Hard rip-offs, basically like Die Hard on a insert mode of transport or insert location here, that you saw throughout the 90s, basically. So.
A long line of Die Hard rip-offs, including Die Hard 2, Die Hard 3.
Yes. There are a hell of a lot of these. And Harrison Ford almost didn't do it. They actually wanted Kevin Costner originally for this role, but he dropped out to make another film. So then kind of Ford was kind of next on their list. You get Harrison Ford as a president, as a very a kind of action man president, essentially. So he's action man in terms of he wants America very active on the world stage. He's definitely not an isolationist. He wants America involved in conflicts overseas. Basically, been world police type thing, really. He gives a big speech to some Russian delegates. But basically about the importance of their of them supporting each other and alliances, and towards security and everything like that. You get this is also prime shouty Gary Oldman villain era, which again you got a lot of in the 90s, along with films like Leon and Fifth Element, and he's essentially in this. He's the leader of this terrorist cell, who they're disguised as Russian journalists, to report on the president's visit to Russia, and they sneak out, they infiltrate the plane, and then one of the Secret Service agents has basically been bought off and lets them into the weapons vault on the plane, basically. So that's how they take it. And their plan is basically to keep the plane airborne and flying back towards Kazakhstan, executing hostages all on the way, to basically influence the US to get their leader, their dictator, who's currently in prison, released, so they can make Kazakhstan and the wider former USSR a going concern on the world stage again, basically. So
make Kazakhstan great again, kind of thing.
Yeah, basically.
How big is Air Force One, Sam? How many rooms does it have?
From the outside.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big plane, but it's as big as the film needs it to be, essentially.
Yes. I mean, well, Jacob at least knows now the concept of the TARDIS from Doctor Who. It's not quite that extent, but the principle carries.
Yeah. Yeah, there's plenty of space to run around and hide from terrorists and have shootouts and big brawls and everything. So this was directed by Wolfgang Peterson, who's quite an interesting director in terms of the range of stuff he's done in his career. So he so as well as this, obviously over the years he did. So he started off with Das Boots, obviously making a big kind of art house kind of world cinema kind of splash, with that to start off his career. But then going into things like Neverending Story was like his first big American film, and then Outbreak, Perfect Storm, Troy. And obviously Air Force One was his big one in the 90s. So I think he was criticised quite a bit later in his career for kind of starting out as someone quite an interesting kind of indie kind of auteur, kind of with his stories grounded like real world events, and then going for this big popcorn blockbuster kind of stuff. But you can't. I don't think you can blame him for wanting a decent paycheck, really. That they apparently they actually they denied him access to the real Air Force One. He just wanted to visit one day and just see kind of what the gist, kind of the layout and everything, kind of how things worked and everything. And but that the Defense Department, kind of denied that until Harrison Ford made a personal call to the White House. Spoke to Bill Clinton and said, "Do you mind? Can we just have a quick look around and make the movie better?" And then a few years later, lo and behold, Bill Clinton loved the movie.
They might have read the script and thought that he was an undercover filmmaker that was actually a Kazakh terrorist. So I get it.
That's true.
There's weird things about that around Harrison Ford movies. Quickly go back to Last Crusade. It's the what's the big building that they use for the outside where the Grail is kept. It's an actual place in Jordan. Is it the Petra or something like that?
Yeah, Petra.
There is a story that essentially they managed to get that because Steven Spielberg was introduced to the Prince of Jordan at a party by three-time Formula One world champion Jackie Stewart. I've been unable to confirm or deny this in anything deliberately by Spielberg. If I ever get the chance, this is the question I will ask if this is true. It just seems like one of those things where weird stuff happens. And I'm also reminded of Kubrick doing all the bombers for Dr. Strangelove. And he essentially just makes insides of planes. And one day the FBI turn up going, "How have you got this so accurate?" It's like, we didn't, we just made a plane.
Yeah. I mean, they did obviously do their recce and kind of go around Air Force One and take the notes, but they basically end up doing their own thing, really. Doing their own kind of layout and everything just for what worked for the film. I mean, Bill Clinton noted that though he really enjoyed the film, he points out that the real Air Force One doesn't have like a parachute like ramp at the back or an escape pod, that can be dropped out. So if the president's in danger, which. I think he said something on the lines of, "Though I wouldn't be surprised if future versions did include these features, because they're a good idea."
Trump has definitely lobbied to have like escape pods built in, and like I watched Air Force One, the movie. I have some ideas.
Well, I can't remember which president it was. Somebody like Clinton or Bush or somebody like that. It was from a couple of decades ago. That said that they've been made president. And they're like, okay, one of the first things I want to do is I want to check out the war room. And I had to break it to them that it doesn't exist.
That was Reagan. That was Reagan.
Oh, was it Reagan? Okay. And they're like, yeah, this doesn't exist. Yes, I've seen that film, Dr. Strangelove. No, that's not a thing.
Which I'm amazed that the actor, kind of was, didn't think that they'd make stuff up like that. So this wasn't a cheap film, obviously for Buena Vista, I think it was, made it. But so 85 million it cost, and actually, and 20th Century Fox, Fox as well were kind
and production companies were Columbia, Beacon, distributed by Sony, so they're going to have chucked a decent amount of money in.
But basically, apparently, a lot of the big studios at the time they were looking with intense interest at the kind of escalating costs and overruns of Titanic, basically, and then because of that, being very wary about about any kind of big production going on at the same time, and keeping very close eye on it. And obviously, when things kind of did end up being more expensive and overrunning, they were they were cautious. But apparently Rupert Murdoch he was a big fan of the final products, and he kind of had more faith in that than Titanic, basically. When Titanic finally came out, he said, oh yeah, it was a good film, but this other studio did Air Force One, I preferred that.
The irony of that being that Air Force One got nominated for Best Sound and Best Film Editing at the Oscars and lost both to Titanic.
Yeah. So, but basically, it's a film. It's a series of like mini kind of set pieces. Basically, follows the president kind of hiding while he's playing and taking out the terrorists. One by one, but very John McClane style. All the time, trying to save as many of the hostages as possible, particularly his wife and daughter who are on the plane, and his cabinet on the ground, trying to negotiate with the terrorists and keep things moving. And I mean, at first they think that the president has escaped, because they've noticed that the escape pod has dropped, so they presumed he was on it, but it turns out he smugged himself away in like the baggage area.
This is obviously a thing, not just Harrison Ford and planes, but Harrison Ford films and escape pods being a plot device.
Yeah. And he gets like one of the kind of the satellite phones on the plane and calls the White House kind of public information kind of desk and it says put me through. I'm the president, and she's like, oh yeah, sure you are, sir. Yeah. And he goes,
trace the call.
Trace the call. Verify me. She says, all right, sir, if you want to make this a federal matter.
And then it's like, oh, this is
true.
true. I'll pass you through.
I'll put you straight through, Mr. President.
I mean, let's be honest. That is actually the most realistic part of the entire film.
Yeah.
Somebody will be like, yeah, sure. Yeah. Actually, no, it's not realistic because she actually went and checked. I don't think anybody actually would.
Yeah. I mean, I will say this. I don't think it's possibly the best idea. I mean, I know Air Force One's like heavily protected and everything. It's got all kinds of safety features, but I still don't think like wildly firing automatic weapons in an aircraft mid-flight is an especially good idea.
No, it's not.
Probably depends on the cabin pressure levels.
Yeah.
Well, considering most plane skins are like a millimeter thick, if a bullet goes stray,
do we call them skins?
The outside of what would you call it?
Fuselage?
I don't know. The exterior?
I couldn't think of a technical term, so skin is the nearest I can get. Okay?
The plane skin.
I mean, there is a plot point at one because they've got like a fighter jet kind of escort who basically, once they realise the terrorists are taking over, there's not what they can do except just follow Air Force One. But they do. He does order a strike on his own plane at one point because he realises their missiles won't penetrate, but they'll produce a shockwave great enough to shake everyone around a bit and give me an advantage against this guy I'm fighting at the time.
That is the thing. At the beginning, they are like, "Oh, we have like super like tough skin that like even like a pulse weapon can't get through." I think that was a line probably thrown in to allow them to fire a load of guns off and get away with it.
It's made out of a 1950s refrigerator.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give it this. For the most part, the kind of the action scenes in fight, the stuff with the planes, still it's pretty good. It's I mean, it helps a lot if it's at night as well, I suppose. But it's it's still kind of just about holds up. The problem you get is like in the final act. I mean, it ends up crashing in the sea basically, and that goes very kind of PlayStation cutscene at that point.
Yes, 1997 CGI is getting to the point where they're just getting to the thing where we can just about get away with showing this. And let's be honest, it's night and day compared to sort of 13, 14 years earlier with Tron. but it's still dodgy in a lot of places.
But much like Independence Day, they have to get a line in there about why the president is so physically able. Because I think he's a former fighter pilot, isn't he? In Independence Day, so it's justifying getting in the plane at the end. Whereas in this one of his aides says, "Let's not forget, this president was a Medal of Honor winner."
Oh, God.
Take done.
Yeah, exactly.
So he wasn't just in Vietnam; he was like a super soldier as well.
Yeah. He was like a war hero. Yeah. And there's this other line. I mean, it's a very 90s kind of one-liners in this, but it's a nice one. Nice one. It's like there's reference to it. He's got like a signed baseball glove on board. He's like really into his baseball, and he's just messing around with it. And one of his aides is like, "No one does this to the United States. The president will get his baseball glove back and play catch with this guy's balls."
It's exactly what you think a 90s action movie is meant to be.
Yeah, and of course the classic, Bond-esque kind of one-lining to see off the main villain is, so tie him up in a load of kind of strapping, so like basically he gets tangled in a parachute and gets his neck broken, basically, but not before Force says, "Get off my plane." Yeah, and I mean Gary Oldman, he's good value as a villain, kind of quite cartoony villain. He likes monologuing and being all threatening and shouting and everything.
Going from fairly calm to in about half a second.
Yeah.
How's his accent work?
Yeah, I mean he's always been good with voices. He's a bit of a chameleon, I think, is Gary Oldman. Like that, he was using kind of
AI to be able to adjust his accent work.
He was using his wage from like all these bigger films he was in the 90s to finance his independent film career. So this basically allowed him to make Nil by Mouth, which was directorial debut a few years later. So which is nice to see. And interestingly, they actually kill off the main villain about 25 minutes before the end of this, and you're thinking, where else can this go?
I mean, watching this, I saw it, I'm like, there's still like 25-30 minutes to go. I'm not sure how long the credits are, but like I'm expecting to see him like kind of alien style, like reappear from somewhere, and kept waiting for it. It never happened. He actually is dead.
Yeah, so you kind of, and you don't really expect the final set piece they give you, which is basically it's like, okay, kind of the terrorists have been neutralized. We're all right now, but now the plane's going down, and people come to rescue us, but we kind of need to facilitate that. We need to kind of do like a line, like almost like a winch between two planes, basically.
I was going to say, there is a weird thing where Gary Oldman is in another film where there's two planes and they've got connections between the two, and one of them ends up crashing. I wonder if this is anything Christopher Nolan might have taken influence from in any way.
Crashing this plane.
Apparently, Randy Newman.
What is yours? Sorry.
Randy Newman was going to do a score for this.
Expect one plus the Wreckage brother.
Sorry, stop now.
Yeah. So Randy Newman was originally hired to do this film score, which I find incredible because I don't think of him doing like blockbuster scores really.
You've got a present me.
Yeah. But yeah, Wolfgang Peterson didn't really like kind of the score he delivered, so he got Jerry Goldsmith in to do a new score in 12 days.
I told you there was an alien connection.
Yeah.
Does it show?
And, no, it's a good standard kind of brass-heavy blockbuster score.
I was gonna say it's like somebody, a film composer, had to make a film score for a blockbuster in 12 days.
12 days, yeah.
It feels like it's not awful, and you're not going to remember it. But at the time, it goes, "This is fine. It works. This will do," kind of thing.
Yeah, but
better than we can do. But no.
Yeah. But Newman's work didn't go to waste because he later was able to recycle elements of the score in Toy Story 3. So I wonder if it was for like the furnace scene.
Yes.
Gary Oldman is by no means a method actor. They have a big punch up at one point, him and Harrison Ford. And apparently when he slams Harrison Ford against the wall and first few punches at him, and but at the end of one take, the director yells cut, and Oldman stood back up and then said, "I can't believe I'm beating up Han Solo."
That does remind me. Is it in Spectre when they were filming it, and you got Daniel Craig and Dave Bautista as a bad guy, and they're meant to be doing faking stuff, and Daniel Craig accidentally slugs Dave Bautista, and just has this moment of, "Oh my god, this guy's massive. He's gonna completely destroy me." But then probably Dave Bautista's like, "I just got punched by James Bond. I can't do anything back."
Kind of critically, it was kind of decently reviewed in like the main areas. A few critics had some issues with it. It was considered like a bit of a dumb blockbuster, which is essentially what it is. But it's stayed kind of popular over the years, and it was a big box office success. So against the 85 million budget, made back 315 million worldwide. So not bad at all. I'd say just generally, it's just like park your Brent door and just Die Hard's in a different situation. Harrison Ford is good as action man president. It's well within his wheelhouse. Doesn't really have to stretch himself much, but he equips himself well in like the action scenes, and he's charismatic as always. And
gives a good speech at the beginning of the movie. His "Be Afraid" speech.
Yes, but and in that, fun enough, straight after that, in the motorcade, back to Air Force One, his aides are kind of so why didn't you discuss that with us? This should have gone to Congress, and basically executive power. Oh, that seems more relevant now, doesn't it? Basically going behind his cabinet's back and not consulting Congress and just announcing stuff because they can't really roll it back.
I mean, Wall Street Journal poll in 2016 named Harrison Ford's James Marshall the greatest fictional president. And then it scored the highest opening weekend for an R-rated film.
What is the qualification for best fictional president? Like, do we see him promote policy, or is it just because he could shoot his gun at bad guys?
It's because it's Harrison Ford. I don't care.
It's actually it's because he's an action man president. And he gets things done, and he won't negotiate with terrorists, and he wants to.
But this new,
but he's
Harrison
also
Ford...
the family man. He appreciates the input of those lower down than him. There's the one woman on there who kind of runs part of the communication systems, going, they might have disabled the phones, but the fax machines run on a separate system, so if you actually use those, they might have overlooked them. And he goes, if we ever make it down, you're being promoted to Postmaster General, kind of thing. He's that is kind of the
that sounds really impulsive. That doesn't sound like good leadership.
It's one of these kind of heat in the moment, almost military commander kind of thing. That he's meant to be an action hero, but with some kind of almost American everyman dignity, I think, is the kind of.
And you get some other good actors, filling out the ensemble. There's William H. Macy is one of the guys on Air Force One. One guy's taken hostage. Then on the ground, you have Dean Stockwell and Glenn Close as kind of leading his cabinet essentially. And there's a big debate about kind of what the actual chain of command is. If the president is out of action, who does it fall to next? And obviously the VP thinks it's them, but then someone points out, well, actually, according to this bit of the Constitution, it's the Secretary of Defense. I think that's what they argue.
And I will also do a shout out to the very slight cameo from Jurgen Ponchnow, who also has been in several films that have been on this podcast. So he was Leto Atreides in Dune, the 84 version. Yes. He was also he was in Das Boot as well, which is why he would have
Yes.
been in
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
But also,
and,
he was in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me as Woodsman.
yeah.
He was also in the Mouth of Madness as well as Sutter Kane, which is where I knew him from. I'm like, I recognise the face. I'm like, is that Sutter Kane? Yes, it is.
Yeah. And he plays the dictator figure who the terrorists are trying to release. Yeah. So do you think he's got the most appearances of of an actor in all the films we talked about? He's probably up there.
I mean, yeah, he's doing well considering, or sort of individual episodes, because obviously back in the day we only used to do one film.
Yeah.
So some may have been in more that we've got recently, but he's getting up there. That's 4 appearances. He's going fairly well.
Yeah. My favourite silly moment in the whole thing is when one of the fighter jets pulls a "No, Mr. President" moment and basically just flies in front of Air Force One to intercept a missile. Because towards the end they're getting close to the Kazakh border, so obviously kind of their Air Force is up in the air. Some MiGs are coming after them as well. So
if only you had Tom Cruise to like fly underneath the the radar.
Yeah. So it's a decent action film. I think Harrison Ford makes his mark on it. It's not essential. He's done better films, but it's perfectly decent, I'd say.
And to be fair, he is one of the better parts of the film. He what's the phrase? He knew the assignment.
He did, yeah.
Something like that, yeah. And to be honest, after this, he's done some stuff. Again, K-19 Widowmaker, I will say, and then he went through his drama phase, and then he started going into the I can do whatever I want, and a lot of them are going to be kind of retreads of where I've been. So he's done 2 Indiana Jones films, Crystal Skull, and then Dial of Destiny. Came back from Blade Runner 2049. He was in Force Awakens. He was in Expendables 3 for some reason.
Yeah. Cowboys and Aliens. That was probably a mistake.
I'm still stuck on why was the Secretary of Defense next in line.
No, they do explain it, but I think I checked out a bit by that point. There's something in the Constitution. I don't know whether it's the president has to actually be confirmed dead, before the vice president takes over. But by the way, this Glenn Close is the vice president, so we got a fictional female vice president long before the real life one.
Welcome to America.
Yep. Something like that. One of my favorite facts that I haven't managed.
He was in. Sorry, I was going to say he was in Anchorman 2. The legend continues as an old school newspaper man who turns into a were hyena.
I haven't seen it. Again, not my area of comedy. I was just saying that because I have to get this thrown in because I didn't know this. He has had 3 species of animal named after him over the years. Where is my notes?
Didn't he object to them always be like creepy crawlies or something?
Yeah.
It can't be a nice animal. Or something.
Why did it have to be creepy crawlies?
Well, in 1993, he got a spider named after him.
Yep.
Calponi Harrison Fordy. In 2002, he got an ant named after him. Fidel Harrison Fordy. I guess Harrison Fordy is just the second word that you have to use. And then he got a snake named after him. I can't read my own writing. Tachymonoides or something along those lines. Harrison Fordy. So it's like, got a spider, an ant, and a snake named after him. So it's like, oh come on, give me something better. He's now because he did well. It's kind of his own fault considering he used to teach the reptile Boy Scout badge. So he can't complain about the snake at the very least. And I just love the fact he's now on chair of a load of stuff. He's part of the Conservation International. He's on the, hilariously enough, he's now a trustee on the governing body of the Archaeological Institute of America. I wonder why that might have come in. And on May 30th, 2003, he got a Hollywood Walk of Fame star as well.
Which seems very late to me.
Yes, I was going to say Elizabeth Sparkle got one probably after about 10 years. So,
yeah. And yeah, obviously he'll. Oh, it was an Ender's Game as well, wasn't it? Again, a mistake, but you know.
Yes, from the sounds of it, he's going to have been in Captain America: Brave New World, which may possibly be a mistake as well.
Yeah, I mean, so I think he had wanted to kind of be in like something Marvel related for a while, and then they obviously William Hurt sadly passed away, so he stepped into the same role that he played
as president.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's don't underestimate that the money is a success for him. Like every dollar's a win.
I was going to say, considering this is a guy who taught himself carpentry to pay the bills many decades ago, you know, he's definitely not going to be complaining that money's coming in. And let's also remember, therefore, he has been starring in films for 7 decades now. 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, noughties, 10s, and the 20s. So, you know what? At a certain point, the thing is, he's Harrison Ford. He can kind of do what he likes. And I don't think there are going to be many people complaining about it either.
No.
Yeah,
now, long may his kind of unique brand of star kind of charisma, continue, to blaze the screen, and I just hope he also continues to just not give a shit what you think. So.
Harrison, congrats for making it onto the show before you died. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very rare for somebody to do that.
Yeah, we may be doing our Michael Caine episode sometime this year because I don't think he'll be.
Quick, David Attenborough.
Someone get those men in a fridge. Okay, well that's it for Harrison Ford. We'll be back next week with something else. But until then, guys, where can people find you?
You can find me at SSP Thinks Film and sspthinksfilm.com. And I've actually published something on our Substack this week. So sort of related to, the upcoming new Marvel release. I ranked all of the major superhero movies from last year in order of quality. And yep, it was slim pickings. I'll say that.
No. He was in Doctor Strangelove.
I think only one of the 7 is genuinely I consider good. One of them's interesting, and a couple of them are kind of so bad they're good almost. So
and if people are craving that, where do they read that?
Ching.
So you can find that on the Second Cut Pod Substack,
which we now have, and we will be posting more stuff on it. But obviously, there's 3 of us. We have lives.
I will be doing a Captain America: Brave New World review after I've seen it on Sunday, so probably look for that early next week.
Yep. I am Kate Judgmental in the various places. I'm gonna see if I can borrow a car and possibly try to get to Love Hurts, maybe the new slash film that comes out tomorrow. It's not My Bloody Valentine, but it's a Valentine's Day slasher movie. We're going to compare it to My Bloody Valentine, if I can. If not, there will be things that I'm putting up in various places.
And you can find me at Jacob Film Guy on whatever, but I'm not on the Nazi app anymore, so don't find me there. Yeah, and you can find us on everything at Second Cut Pod or at Second Cut Podcast, because Second Cut by itself sounds like it could be anything, so we got to clarify. You can email us too at secondcutpod@gmail.com. We don't have any merch to plug anymore, but I mean, send money to the Film Magazine's PayPal. Joe will dole it out. He's a good, honest guy. So yeah, if you want to send us cash, we'll find a way.
And there's if you go to the Film Magazine, which is still up, and just type in Harrison Ford, there's quite a few articles on the Harrison Ford. So I've got Blade Runner Moments. Joe did the Indiana Jones movies, Blade Runner, Ridley Scott movies, Star Wars.
I ranked the Peter Weir films, so and he was in 2 of those. So,
yeah, I did a Catherine Bigelow ranking. So we're all in there if you haven't got enough of Harrison Ford.
You have that until 2030, so go check it out while it lasts. That is it. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.
Adios.
Goodbye.